Hey everybody, and welcome to another Deep Dives. Today we're going to be tackling something that I know a lot of you have been requesting, and that is how to improve small talk in English.
Small talk is so important, and
Yeah,
it really is like the first step you take to having a deeper conversation with someone.
absolutely. And so let's just jump into it. Let's say you're at work and you bump into a colleague who just got back from vacation. I've noticed that native speakers, English speakers, often have a particular way of kind of signaling that they just got back from somewhere.
Right.
How do they usually do that?
Well, it's really fascinating because instead of just saying, I went on vacation, they'll often say something like, oh, I just got back from Spain.
Huh.
So that just implies that they just did it, and it kind of invites the other person to ask, oh, tell me more.
I see.
How was it?
And so then they get to talk about their vacation. That's a nice little phrase there.
Yeah.
Just kind of slip in there. I just got back. Now, one thing that I've heard a lot is after someone talks about their vacation, the other person sometimes will say something like, oh, I'm so jealous. And, that always sounded to me like maybe a little bit strong for, just casual conversation,
Right.
Like, are you really jealous?
Well, that's a great point, and it really highlights how important tone and context are when you're speaking casually with someone, because I'm so jealous can sound very envious in some situations. But if you're just having a casual conversation with someone and they tell you about their vacation to Spain and you say, oh, I'm so jealous,
Yeah.
it's really just a playful way of saying like, wow, I wish I could have done that too, or that sounds amazing.
I see. So it's all about how you say it.
Exactly.
Got it. And, after they've chatted about the trip for a bit, the colleague who was on vacation might say, well, it's been great catching up.
Right.
And catch up has so many meanings. What do they mean by catch up in this case?
Yeah, that's a good point. It really depends on the context, but in this particular case, you're right. Catch up means to reconnect and hear about what someone has been up to.
Okay.
It's a little bit different than saying, I need to catch up on work, which means I have a lot to do and I need to get it done.
Right. So you're making a certain level.
Right, exactly.
Okay, got it. Now, as the conversation wraps up, people will often say something like, well, I must be going,
Right.
to signal they need to leave. But, why not just say, okay, bye?
Well, I think it's all about social cues because instead of just ending the conversation abruptly, saying something like, well, I must be going, is a way to kind of politely and gracefully exit the conversation.
Oh, I see. You're acknowledging that you enjoyed the conversation.
Right.
But you do have other things to do.
Exactly.
Got it. So now, just kind of a random question. I've always wondered about the phrase, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It seems very American to me. And
it is.
And it seems like it could be used in a lot of different situations.
Yeah, it is a very American phrase, and it's definitely versatile.
Yeah.
You can use it to mean yes. You can use it to mean definitely. You can use it to mean I agree.
So just like, sure.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay. But it's a little...
Yeah, it's a little bit more emphatic. It's a little bit more emphatic and a little bit more casual.
Okay, got it. I like that one. So, okay, now moving on. We've talked about some specific phrases.
Right.
But is there kind of a general, strategy for choosing small talk topics?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best approach is to try to find common ground.
Okay.
So you can talk about things like travel or hobbies or even just the weather. Especially with people that you don't know very well, it's better to avoid controversial topics like politics or religion.
Yeah, you don't want to offend anyone, yeah.
Exactly.
Especially when you first meet them.
Right.
So you just want to keep it light.
Exactly.
Easy topic.
Light and easy.
And just kind of build that rapport.
Exactly. And then as you get to know the person better, you can kind of start to dive into those deeper topics.
Absolutely. Yeah, good point. Now, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, which is the phrase, I wish I was.
Right.
Because it seems pretty straightforward, but I feel like there's more to it than meets the eye.
I agree.
Like in the example, the colleague says, I wish I was still on that beach. It sounds lighthearted enough, but is there a deeper meaning there?
I think it's interesting how we use language to kind of express longing or yearning.
Yeah.
Because when you say, I wish I would, it does convey a sense of wistfulness.
Yeah.
It's like you're kind of daydreaming a little bit, but it's also, it adds humor to the conversation.
Yeah.
And it also makes it relatable because who hasn't wished that they were back on a beautiful beach?
Exactly. Exactly. We've all had that feeling. Okay, so now I'm curious about how questions function in small talk.
Right.
They seem really important for keeping the conversation going.
Absolutely. Questions are kind of like the engine of small talk because it shows that you're engaged and it encourages the other person to talk about themselves more. Like in our example, the colleague asks, have you been to Spain before or was this your first time?
Right. And that simple question, it just gives the other person a chance to talk more about their experience.
Exactly. And it shows that you're genuinely interested in what they have to say.
Right.
And it keeps that back and forth going, which is the basis of any good conversation.
Yeah, it's like a dance.
Exactly.
Back and forth.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. No, we've been focusing a lot on the words themselves, but what about like the unspoken elements of a conversation?
That's a great point. I mean, nonverbal communication is crucial. Like your facial expressions, your tone of voice, your body language, even just a smile can convey so much.
It's like adding the spices to the dish.
Yes, exactly.
You got the basic ingredients, but the spices make it really flavorful.
Exactly.
Yeah. Even though we're just looking at a transcript here. We can almost imagine like these two people standing at the water cooler.
Right.
Chatting, smiling, and nodding.
Yeah.
And that just adds so much to the conversation.
I agree. And it really just goes to show how much we communicate without even speaking.
Right.
We're always sending these signals back and forth.
Absolutely. So I guess as we kind of wrap up this section of our deep dive, how can listeners kind of apply what we've been talking about to their own lives?
That's a great question. I think the key is to just approach small talk with a sense of curiosity and playfulness.
Yeah.
You don't have to memorize a script. Just be yourself.
Right.
Be present in the moment.
Yeah, just be genuine.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, like anything else, it just takes practice.
Absolutely. The more you do it, the easier it'll intro.
Exactly. So, okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to touch on something that I think could be a little bit intimidating for people learning English, and that's the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people, they just get so nervous about saying the wrong thing or sounding silly that they just avoid having conversations at all.
Yeah, and that's so understandable, but it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Even native speakers. I mean, it's just part of learning.
Yeah, you can't let it hold you back.
Exactly. You got to go for it.
Yeah, jump in.
Yeah.
And make those mistakes and learn from them.
Exactly. And a lot of times, native speakers will really appreciate that you're trying to learn their language. And they're usually more than happy to help you if you get stuck.
Yeah, they'll correct you if you need it, or they'll just understand what you mean.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, thinking back to this conversation that we've been analyzing, what are some of the key takeaways for listeners who want to get better at small talk?
Well, I think it just shows how important it is to pay attention to the nuances of casual conversation.
Okay.
Like we talked about earlier, those little phrases like, I just got back, or I'm so jealous, or for sure, they can really make a big difference in making your conversation sound more natural.
Right. It's almost like learning the secret code.
Right, exactly. And it's not just about memorizing phrases, but it's about understanding how to use them in different situations.
Right. And I guess also just kind of observing
Yes.
how native speakers use these phrases and
Absolutely.
just picking up on those little things.
Pay attention to how they speak, their body language, their tone of voice, all of that.
It's all part of it.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about something that I personally struggle with, which is sometimes I just overthink things.
Right.
And my mind goes blank.
Yeah, that happens to all of us.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? And then I just end up saying nothing.
Right.
So any tips on that?
Yeah, I think a good tip is to have a few go-to topics in mind, like things that you're genuinely interested in.
Yeah.
Whether it's movies or books or travel or hobbies, whatever it is. That way you always have something to talk about.
Right. So if the conversation starts to die down, you can just kind of bring up one of those topics.
Exactly.
Okay, good tip. And then what about if you need to wrap up the conversation?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, sometimes you just need to get going.
Right. You've got to move on.
And that's fine. There are some polite ways to do that.
Okay.
You could say something like, it was great talking to you, but I really need to run, or I should let you get back to work.
Okay. So just acknowledge that you enjoyed the conversation.
Right.
And then give a reason why you need to leave.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, I think this has been a really helpful deep dive.
Yeah, I've
learned a lot.
Me too.
And I hope our listeners have too.
I hope so.
And, just remember, small talk is a skill. It takes practice.
It does.
So don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
Make those mistakes.
Right.
And just keep practicing.
Yeah. Have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.